Welcome back, everyone, to another episode of the Mad Men Podcast, your podcast dedicated to the AMC television show Mad Men, where you can find your best source for news, talk, and more. And my name is Jeremiah, and I'm joined by Elise. How you doing, Elise?
I'm good, Jeremiah. How are you doing?
I am doing great. We are here live on madmenpodcast.com/live. A little bit early today. I do apologize. For those of you, I know we mentioned we were going to do it at, what was it? What time did we say we were going to do it? 7:30 Eastern time. And this time we're doing it quite a bit earlier, actually. We're doing it at 6 o'clock Eastern time. I actually just came back from the hospital. I'm only a few hours away from coming back from the hospital. I had an incident with my back. Long story short, it looks like I'm going to be okay. I think I just pulled something. But I'm a little bit drowsy? What would be the right word to use, Elise? A little bit
high as a kite? I don't know.
Yeah. This should be a very interesting podcast because I'm not quite myself at the moment. So, but luckily, Elise, I know you're a rock star. You'll be prepared and ready for this podcast, unlike myself, who is a little bit off. So, but yeah, so we just wanted to apologize real quick for that. That we are doing this a little earlier than we originally expected. So, and so hopefully it will go well, right, Elise?
Absolutely. Sorry, my phone is ringing. I usually take it out of here.
That's okay. I thought maybe that was Matthew Weiner wanting to join in on the show or something.
I keep telling him, stop calling me. Leave me alone.
That guy, I tell you what, he really needs to stop bothering you like this.
He does.
You know? Oh man, Matthew. Oh boy, no, that's all right. You know what's so funny is I have podcasts before and forgot my phone was in here and went off right in the middle of the show. And I'm like, oh man. So that's the excitement too about it. The people that are watching the live stuff, they get to see all of the stuff that happens to us during a recording. So. But anyway, yes, we are here live. I don't know if anybody's going to be joining us since we're doing this last minute kind of early, but if you are, great. You can go to madmenpodcast.com/live. There's a chat room there. You can chat away if you want to. And otherwise, if you listen to us at archive, great. We are, of course, going to be covering the fourth episode of Season 7, the Monolith. And that's pretty much for the most part we're going to do. We are skipping the gossip section because we're kind of tight on time. Elise, we mentioned this last week. You're going to be going to a screening tonight to see John's new film, aren't you?
Yes, I'm going to go see $1 Million Arm this evening, and hopefully it'll be fabulous. I've been seeing some pretty good reviews, so that's promising. And you know, it's got a baseball theme, so we like that. And I will let you guys know next week how quickly to go buy your tickets.
Yeah, exactly. So that's exciting. So for those of you who do love the gossip section, Elise is going to give us a nice review of the movie, so you'll get the idea of whether or not it's something you'd be interested in seeing. So that'll be great. And also all the cool stories that I was going to share, I promise we'll add all those in there. We'll have a nice, juicy gossip section next week for that. But otherwise, we'll go ahead and move right into the review. Of course, we'll start off with some episode info. The Monolith, like I said, is the fourth episode of the 7th season of Mad Men. It was written by Aaron Levy and directed by Scott Hornbecker and originally aired in the United States on May 4th, 2014. Elise, what did you think about this episode overall? Did you enjoy this one?
I did.
Okay. Yeah, I did as well. I thought it was another very solid episode. I love Erin's writing. Usually, whenever I know that she's involved, I don't know how much you're familiar with Erin's work, but I thought this was a great episode. The only thing I would say is that I know this show is very heavily themed show, and I know they love all their different references. I know they really like to do. I'm trying to think what I'm trying to say. They really like the really throw in the metaphors. That's what I'm trying to say. And they really was really heavy in this episode, and especially you had mentioned off air about a lot of the references going back to the film 2001: Space Odyssey, which we'll talk about that, and just many more. The references about with the Mets and how there's a lot of metaphors with that, and just a lot of the conversations going on about the computer itself. Really, the computer itself kind of was the monolith of this episode. Wouldn't you agree with that?
No, absolutely, absolutely, on many, many levels. I mean, they literally look like monoliths, and definitely reference to 2001. And I mean, there was a lot. It was chock full of metaphor this week, and I don't know. I kind of like it. I like it when I discover something, because I didn't even, I said in my blog that I've never actually watched 2001: A Space Odyssey. I'm familiar with the film just, as a reference, but I've never actually watched it. And so I was just Googling Monolith just to see, because I was like, well, why did they call it that? Is it just because of the computers, looking like monoliths? And when I Googled it, the whole 2001 references came up, and then when I read the synopsis of the film, it was like, oh my God, this was, serious lines pulled directly from 2001: A Space Odyssey and put into characters' mouths last night.
Right, and I'm sure anyone that was that's a huge fan of the movie were probably picking up on those references right away. I know myself, I've seen it one time. It's one of those movies that I've watched it, and I'm not the biggest fan of the movie, but it is a classic as far as cinematography. I mean, it's one of those movies that people reference all the time. It has so much meaning to it, and it was made in a time period which where, of course, Mad Men is taking place in, where so many things are changing technology-wise, and the world is changing so quickly, and there was a lot of things that people were afraid of. Well, one of the things they were afraid of was the fact of computers somehow, someday taking over humans or whatever, right? And it's funny because if you think about it, here we are many, many years later, and that's still kind of the fear that people have today when we see how fast technology has advanced. You think about this IBM 360 computer that they had in this, that they were referenced to in the show, and that computer, as powerful as it was at the time, is no more powerful than this little iPhone that I have right here in my hand. And that's what's so crazy, that we're at this point now where you almost kind of look at a movie like 2001 and go, wait a minute, this could actually happen. And for Don Draper and everybody, I'm sure that computer was a terrifying thing for them, because it's just like, for the same reason that we think of technology today, is that it's going to replace us.
Yeah, absolutely. No, I mean, definitely. And Don even, says as much when he's talking to Lloyd Halley, that which company is replacing more humans, Lease Tech, which is Lloyd's business, or IBM. So I mean, he
right.
Literally says, like, which one of you is putting more people out of work?
Yeah, exactly. And it's because this show has so many times has dealt on the references of these characters worrying so much about other people replacing themselves. They're always constantly concerned about their position and worrying about whether or not someone else could maybe take over the spot. And here in this episode, we reach into a modern type worry, is that you could possibly be replaced by computers or technology of some kind. And I think a lot of people face that even today. There's lots of concerns that, wow, this machine over here can pretty much do my job, and it's a common scare for all of us even today. So it's interesting to see that even in 1969 it was also a concern of them, as they got to really watch this stuff quickly happen for them. So much was changing during this time period. I guess the two big storylines we have, the A and B storyline, one being, of course, everything that's going on at Sterling Cooper and Partners, and then we had the other side story there about what happened with Roger and Mona going out to rescue their daughter. What would you like to start with? I thought maybe should we start with what was going on in the office, and Don's getting to see Don back to work, or at least at first he doesn't seem like he was doing a whole lot of work. But I guess most of it actually kind of gets started with what happens in California when Pete gets an opportunity to get a pitch for Burger Chef. What did you see? There was a couple of things I really definitely want to talk about real fast with the Pete mention here, and that has to do with the fact that Pete seems to be very out of the loop with his marriage. Things he must not be talking at all.
Well, they said that they're actually getting a divorce now, Or at least he
Right.
told George from Burger Chef that.
Right.
And I thought he looked like genuinely concerned about his ex-father-in-law or soon-to-be ex-father-in-law having a heart attack, and like he almost looked like a little sad maybe, or that nobody had told him, or he hadn't been there, or whatever. Pete had an emotion,
Right.
and
No,
I thought that was interesting that he's. I mean, I'm not surprised, I guess, but it was interesting that he had some pang of guilt or something there.
yeah, I picked up on that too. He's out to dinner with his date with
Slash
Bonnie.
real estate agent.
I love the conversation they had there for a second. Like she's like kind of annoyed by him always announcing her as his real estate agent, and it's funny because she's taking kind of offense to it. Like, hey,
Tell
you
people
don't
I'm
want to
your
be known
girlfriend.
as my girlfriend, and he's thinking of it as like, no, I'm trying to help you with your business. He's always thinking about business.
He is. It was a just total misconnect. It was like, ah.
So apparently now he's going to announce her as this is my girlfriend Bonnie, who is gonna be your real estate agent. I thought that was great.
It was good.
Did you
Did
reckon?
you? Sorry.
Oh, I'm sorry. No, I was gonna say, did you recognize George? Because I think we did briefly see him once before. I thought, but am I wrong about that?
I didn't recognize him. I'm sure we must have seen him somewhere during the VIX thing. It was a while back. But who I did recognize was George's date in that crazy pink feathered sequin gown. That looked like Dr. Faye to me. In a very un-Dr. Faye outfit.
These both of these things, since I had spent the whole day in the hospital, I did not get a chance to do my Monday researching, so I'm not quite sure. As far as the George part of it, I'm not quite sure if we have seen him before. I was going to look up the actor and see if he had been in a previous episode of Mad Men, so I didn't get a chance to do that, unfortunately. That's one fact check thing I need to do, and the other one would be is you had just recently mentioned to me off air about that, and I'm going to have to go back and look. I would think, though, if it was, that would have been all over the internet. That would be my guess.
Well,
and
they barely showed her. They barely showed her, and I had to freeze frame it on her and look at her, and she's really made up. I mean, she's crazy made up.
Mm-hmm.
And she's got this ridiculous outfit on. But I went and checked on IMDb the cast roster, and that character isn't listed. Maybe because she doesn't have a speaking role. They didn't show her. She's not listed at all as George's date or anything else. George's there, but
right.
So I don't know. I mean, it might just be somebody who looks like her, just another of the Mad Men blondes. But it would be interesting to see.
I got this theory, Elise, that I think Matt loves to cast actors that look very similar to previous characters, just to mess with us sometimes. Just to make us go, hey, is that Dr. Faye? That's what I think is going on there.
Like Emily last week, who looked just like Anna's niece from before. Everybody was like,
right.
Wait, what was that? So you're probably right. It's probably just Matt having fun toying with us.
Most likely. So I think the only important thing I thought for sure that we could get out of what was going on in California was the fact that Pete and Trudy, obviously they're moving on with their divorce, but sadly, he's really not in touch with her and didn't even know that poor Tom had this heart attack. And I do agree. I think he did seem genuinely upset about it, or at least sort of. For Pete Campbell, we know Pete doesn't have much of a heart sometimes, but he did seem genuinely a little bit upset about it.
He did. I agree.
But he didn't waste any time to gloat about the fact that Bob Benson will not be able to touch this Burger Chef account. He worked so hard to get the whale with the whole Chevy line of dealers, and that had to go partially to Bob Benson, and now he's got this one. He's like, hey, Bob can't get this one. It has nothing to do with Detroit.
Absolutely. I think he's got it free and clear. Of course, turns the knife in Peggy with having Dawn on the account with her, so she gets the short end of the stick on this one.
Yeah, he kind of sets the tone for this as well when the conversation about who's going to be handling this pitch. I thought it was great. I'm not surprised that Pete was sticking up for Don just like Roger was, because for what we've been shown so far this season, those are two people inside the company that is on Don's side. Would you not disagree with that? Or because to me, Roger and Pete are the only ones that we can see for sure that wants Don around.
Yeah, I think I agree. I mean, yes. I mean, because Don's probably done as much for Roger as Roger has done for Don,
Right.
and Pete too. I mean, Don covered his end of the partner money. He's saved his bacon a few times too. So I don't think they got quite as burned out by Don's behavior as everybody else did, because maybe
Yeah.
they have a little bit more bad behavior of their own.
Yeah, I think so. You know, with Roger, there's a long relationship they've had together, and even though Pete and Don have kind of been, you know, foes to each other for a long time, I think they're at a point now in the relationship that they they appreciate what each other's done for them. I mean, you know, Pete's been good about helping keeping Don's secret for a long time, and I know that Don, despite the fact that there's times he really can't stand Pete, that he recognizes that Pete's a really good salesman, a, a good account guy, and has always been on his side. And I think the two of them mutually now have respect for each other and have moved past all those small differences, and they're friends now. And I think that's kind of cool. Don needs as many friends as he can get because, as this episode shows, quite evident that the bringing Don back was pretty clear to the rest of the partners and the rest of everyone at Sterling Cooper Partners that this was just a compromise because they didn't want to pay him out. That's kind of what I'm picking up, because it's apparent to Don Draper. Here we are, about 3 weeks or so from the last episode, which we, of course, said here on the Mad Men podcast that we were at March 31st, the last one. So now we're mid-April then, is from what we can tell from some of the signs we picked up on. And he's gone, I think Roger even says, 3 weeks he's been in that cave. What was the reference? Because there's another 2001 reference there, wasn't there?
It's something to the effect of he's been in his cave for 3 weeks and he hasn't hit another ape, which
Right.
is the
The
first
opening to the film.
sequence in 2001. It's cavemen, and the Monolith comes down and teaches them how to use tools and beat each other to death with bones. Sticks. So that's our first reference, but and it's also, Don's pretty primitive.
Yeah,
So-
he is. He is. So, what did you think? So, obviously, the first thing we get to find out is that they had a lot of conversation about, having Don be part of it. Lou takes that and decides to tweak it in his own way. What did you think about the reaction that Lou and what the actions he took to put Peggy in charge and then force her to work with Don?
I thought that was interesting because I thought, even in my notes when I was watching and writing down, I thought that first they said they were going to give it to Peggy because they were going to want a woman, and then Pete said, "Is Don not even in the running for this?" And then Roger gave his caveman speech, and then I thought they all agreed that Don would run it. But then I don't know. Then it cut to Lou giving Peggy $100 a week raise, which was a lot of money. But I mean, it's still a lot of money, but it's really a lot of money in 1969.
Absolutely.
That's just $100 a week was probably a lot more than anybody's rent. So so yeah, I mean, I was confused by that. I don't know if Lou just decided to do that and then they were like, well, we'll just go along with it, or if they made that decision that they would put Peggy in charge and make Donnie Crow. I mean, I kind of feel like they are trying to give Don the most difficult time, give him every excuse to behave badly, and if he does, they can get rid of him, and if he doesn't, then he's proven himself and they can trust him again. And whether they're doing that consciously or not, I don't know, but I mean, I definitely felt like in Bert's comments when Don came to him and thought that they should sign this new client, and Bert was just like, you don't even understand why you were asked to leave. That you're always averting all of things that we're asking you to do and trying to do what you want to do rather than doing what's being asked of you. So I think they're not going to have any of it. He cannot do the teeniest mistake, the teeniest misbehavior. He needs to basically suck it up and be Peggy's little tag boy and come up with tags. And he tried everything he could in this episode to skate around that, and I think he finally made it back around.
Yeah, I mean, you think about, you go back to the conversation that Pete and everybody had on the phone. I mean, they obviously Pete wanted Don to be in charge of the whole pitch. They all kind of agreed that it would be nice to have Peggy. Well, Pete didn't, but everybody else was agreeing that it would be nice to have a woman involved in this. So I think kind of what I was thinking is that there was enough wiggle room for Lou to be able to decide the way he wanted to do it. And it's funny because if I'm Lou's got to look at both Pete and Don as a threat for him to stay at Sterling Cooper and Partners as creative director. Both of these two, I mean, she being an up-and-coming star and could have easily been considered to replace Don when they asked him to go on leave, but they, of course, decided to go ahead and hire Lou. Both of these are people that are a threat to him, and I think that for him, he's like, well, I'll put Peggy in charge because I know it's going to put her in an uncomfortable position to basically have a role reversal here where she's in charge of Don. And you could see it immediately in the expression of her face, by the way, when she says,
like, oh,
Don
no.
Draper, and he's like, yep, that's the one. Well, he's short little answers. I tell you what, if I work with this guy, I'd want to slap him so hard. Oh, man, he was annoying me so much during that scene. But you could just tell she was like, uh-oh.
Yeah.
This is not going to go well.
No, you're probably right. I mean, Lou, at least on Lou's part, he might be hoping they cancel each other out. And
yeah,
and just
right.
blow up the whole thing and both get canned.
I mean, because I have this struggle to think that Lou almost acts to me like so many times, I don't even know if he cares necessarily about what's going on. But, for him, this is a way to get both of these two, and if he doesn't matter if they both fail or one fails or whatever, this is a win-win for him, and it was funny because, Cutler had that conversation with him saying, well, listen, maybe you'll get some good work out of him, or maybe he'll crash and burn. But either way, we got to see what happens here. And I think for Lou, he's hoping he's going to crash and burn.
Of course, yeah, he definitely wants Don out of there ASAP because he knows every minute he's there and doing well that that's the sooner he's out. When I hadn't really I mean, I guess I knew, but I wasn't really thinking about it. They have 3 head art director people right now. They've got Ted in LA, Don, and Lou. It's like, all right, that's a little, redundant there. And
right.
then when Cutler was trying to get Ted to come back to New York, and you could see Lou's face just like, no, do not bring Ted back here too. I cannot fight this war on that many fronts.
Yeah, exactly.
I think Lou knows his time is ticking.
Yeah, and it's so true. When Don was having that conversation with Lloyd and him out there, it did hit you going, wait a minute, that's right. They technically have 3 now that Don's back. And I think last week when we were discussing the episode last week, I don't think I even really thought too much about that, but that's true. They have 3 now.
They do.
But at least one of them is on the other side of the country and is handling accounts out there. So you at least got that part of it. I would think as big as they're getting now, they almost kind of do need a couple people in this kind of position to help out with as much creative as they're having to come up with on a regular basis.
It's true.
I don't know enough about the ad business. I don't know if that is common for some of the really, really big companies to have more than one creative director, but it's very possible. Maybe some of our listeners out there that do work in the business could let us know if that is kind of a common thing. But Sterling Cooper and Partners have 3.
Yes.
I think probably the next great scene I got to ask your opinion about was, what did you think about the death stare that Don Draper gives Peggy when she announces what their team's going to be doing?
That whole scene, it was like, first Peggy seemed like she was going to go and knock on Don's door, and then she got kind of off on a power trip, and she was like going to do it like Don has done it to her, where she like gets her drink and she stands at her desk and she kind of tries to be authoritative over them, and I think he was kind of willing to go for it, but then he just couldn't do it when it was like, oh well, that's how Lou likes it, and there's no plan going into it. You just come up with 50 would-be taglines, and then he picks a line, and then we decide what the idea behind the ad's going to be, which is just like sounds impossible. So I mean, I think he just couldn't take it, and having it, it's one thing to report to Lou, I guess, but it's a whole other thing to be like being talked down to by Peggy.
Yeah, it's so demoralizing for. I mean, this guy was creative director, and now he's at the same level as Little Mathis, from.
I know.
Which I always think of him as Fraser's son, but I mean, he's now. I mean, he's at the lowest of low almost when it comes to being creative. Now he's just a little copy guy, and to have Peggy in charge. I mean, all these things I'm sure was rubbing the wrong way. And apparently, and I don't know if you saw AMC, AMC had a great tweet just a few minutes or a few hours ago when they said apparently throwing typewriters is not part of the restrictions for Don Draper.
That scared me. I was like, oh my god, is that going to go out the window? I mean,
Yeah.
I was amazed that didn't cause more damage.
I looked at my wife and said, whoa, those windows in that skyscraper is pretty strong. Because he took that thing and chugged it right up against the wall, right up against the window as hard as he could.
I know, that was insane. I was kind of stunned by that. We were like, ah.
Well, but that pretty much completely describes his frustration because, they're trying so hard. Personally, I'm feeling like when this episode, as it goes through, I get this feeling that Bird and everybody else who definitely is not on his side, but pretty much, I think they're feeling he's never going to change. He's an issue, and they want him to go away. And I think that all these things are being done. Maybe not necessarily on purpose, and maybe not everybody's doing it on purpose. Like, I think everybody has their own agenda. Like I said, I think Lou does have his own agenda. But I do think they're trying to get him to a point where let's just see if he'll maybe quit, And that's kind of, I mean, when I saw that scene and I saw how things were going, and especially when we lead up to the point with the conversation you talked about earlier with Bert, I thought, okay, they really are trying to force him out. I mean, they're putting him in a position where he's going to be just so fed up, he's just going to want to quit. And boy, that frustration did come out. He really took it out on that poor typewriter.
He did, but I think also in his process, he did all the things he does. Like, first he got really angry and destroyed the typewriter, and then he just tried to ignore the whole situation by just not doing the work and shining it on and just being like, I'm not going, and not even having a conversation about it. And then he tried to change the conversation, which he loves to do, and bring in a new client, and Bert just completely shut him down on that. And then he got drunk. Mm-hmm. Which is always, the fail-safe. I'm just going to, go get into some oblivion and not deal with it. So,
yeah, it's just interesting. First, I want to ask you about this Lloyd fella that's from this lease tech. One of the things I first noticed right away was the fact that he kind of looks like Don Draper. Not exactly, but, the white shirt, the tie, the way his hair is done a little bit. He kind of had the Don Draper look a little bit to him. I thought that was kind of interesting, and I like what you came up with was the fact that during the earlier conversation about Lloyd and how he kind of seemed like he was representing Hal as well, right? And you said something about some of his what was some of the dialogue he had there where he was talking about the computer, which was really great stuff when it comes to adding more to this metaphor about with the computers and stuff.
Well, the one main line that he had that was a direct pull from 2001 was human error. That's what Hal, the evil computer, in one portion of the film, he keeps killing off all the astronauts in the spaceship that this computer is in, and he keeps saying it's because of human error that these different issues are happening that ultimately end up killing people. And then when we see Lloyd Holly, he says they're talking about the lighter, and Don also makes the comment about, oh, you think you're so smart, but you can't even make fire because his lighter's not working. And then Holly says that, oh, it's human error. I forgot to put fluid in it. And so that's a direct line that's pulled, and it kind of pulls back to the caveman thing of, Don can make fire good. so so that was definitely that. And then I mean, to me it just seemed like later when Don John Hamm is drunk after, he's gone through his whole process, and on his way out he kind of, staggers up to Lloyd Holly, and basically calls him the devil, and it's like, whoa, oh, and at first I was like, well, where did all that come from? But then once I understood the 2001 thing, I was like, oh, okay, I get it. And there was some biblical stuff in there about knowledge, and the conversation they had about the fear of technology, and how the knowledge of the computer was infinite, and it made man feel godlike when they could run the computers because they had the power over infinite knowledge, which was like, the tree of knowledge, and makes Lloyd a little bit snaky and devilly and altogether bad. So I thought that was interesting that's come back in. That's kind of been a theme in his life with evil and all that. So
yeah, I kind of felt like I was wondering if maybe Don was seeing some of himself in this whole scenario, but he also reference to he goes, I know who you are, you go by many names and stuff, and I'm thinking, wow, that's kind of almost describing who Don Draper is. He's gone by more than one name and stuff. So there was just a lot of interesting, great references there, like you said, and how they did it so perfectly in this episode. The writing was just top notch in this, but it really made me think. I'm sure many fans were probably, especially that scene where he stumbles in there drunk, you probably were going, what in the world is he talking about?
I just love Freddy
meant
chasing
something.
him. Yeah. No, I was kind of like, I kind of got it, like, man versus machine was kind of where I was going before I had that reference. But I thought it was funny when Freddy's like chasing him. He's like, where are you going? He's like almost got him like out of the office without anybody noticing that he's completely blot out. And then, he makes that left turn into the old creative lounge and just starts ranting at the guy, and he's like, come on, keep it together. Kind of muscles him out, pretty quickly.
Right.
So it'll be interesting what, if any, repercussions there will be from that, or if Lloyd will just be gone and the computer will be installed next week and we won't hear any more about it. I don't know.
Oh, yeah, I don't know. Probably not. I mean, it's going to be the computer itself is going to be a focal a little bit, I'm sure, throughout the season.
Sure.
It's a big thing the company's got, and it's going to probably definitely change some things. So that I'm sure we'll hear more about it as the season goes on. But how much all that's going to tie in to the story from here out, we'll see, I'm sure. One of the things I want to ask you about this has got to be the first season I can think of that I really find Bert unlikable. And again, in this episode too, I was like, I understand why he said what he said to Don after Don had this conversation with Lloyd, and he realizes, hey, maybe this could be some new business. And I know what Don's thinking was, hey, I can get off this whole Burger Chef thing, and I could take this and run with this new business, and that could be my thing. Totally get that. Makes sense. Smart idea, actually. But then Bert has this reaction, and I understand Bert's reaction to it, but it was just, it was very cold and callous. I mean, he said it to him. It was just, I was surprised a little. Well, no, I guess I wasn't totally surprised, because Bert is one to say exactly what he's feeling. But I just was a little surprised, and like my wife said, he was completely ignoring the fact that this could have been some new business for him.
It's true, and they may take advantage of that later, although this guy may not want to work with them now that Don Draper has called him the devil. But I mean, Bert was mean. I mean, he was like, yeah, what are you doing here? And Don's like, well, I started this company. He's like, yeah, you and a dead man whose office you now inhabit. I mean, it was like, Jesus, man, that was brutal. A guy hung himself in there.
Yeah.
I mean, it was, I think he was saying, you can hang yourself too. You better straighten up and fly right, and stop all this, behavior, or you're going to be out of here just like Lane, feet first or otherwise. So,
right.
I just think they've all had it with him, and they're not going to give him any slack. And if he can't toe the line, so much so much better. He's out that much quicker.
Yeah, and I guess he cut Bert a little bit of slack because you're right. He is frustrated, like many of them are, and probably doesn't feel that this guy's ever going to change, and he just is done with them. So I totally get that. But you're right. Mentioning poor Lane, and
I know.
Speaking of metaphors and references, we had a lot about that with Lane because not only because Don is in his old office, but then we have the whole Mets thing, which was fantastic, and how they kind of tied that a little bit into the story as well. When first Don finds how did that thing get shoved up underneath that air conditioning unit?
I don't know. That was kind of weird. I was thinking maybe they packed up his things and then that somehow fell out and got kicked
fell
under
down
there.
and somebody scrunched it up underneath.
Sure, that could happen.
I don't know.
Or maybe his wife kicked it under there.
I just was like, really? It's a way scrunched up underneath there? I don't know, guys. I'm buying this story, but okay. So
I was just excited to see it.
Huh?
I was excited to see the pennant.
I was too.
We talked about that a few weeks ago during our predictions, and I was like, oh my God, there's the Mets pennant. We talked about that.
Yeah, we did talk about the Mets. I figured that we were going to. I figured at some point there were a reference. I assumed it would come into the story a little bit later, when the miracle actually happens. That because they were started off going into August being way down, and they just went on this magical run, and they wind up taking the division and the pennant, and go all the way and win the World Series. It was just a magical year for them. So I kind of figured that we would maybe hear something later on in the season when it gets close to them actually winning the World Series. But it was nice because, the writers, they knew that Lane was a Mets fan. You had mentioned that during our prediction podcast when I said, who was the Mets fan? You said it was Lane. I was like, oh, my God, yes. And it was great to see that pennant again because that was the thing I stuck in my mind about was the pennant. I remembered the pennant. And so when we see the pennant in this episode, it was great. My question about this whole thing is, and I've seen other people writing about this today, you think that Don Draper is kind of is the Mets of this season? Do you think that we're going to basically be seeing this guy he's down and out right now? Because that's how the Mets were. They were down and out for a while. It wasn't looking good for him, and then towards the end, the Mets start playing perfectly and go all the way and win the World Series. Is that could this banner, this Mets reference here just be a foreshadowing for us to say that this is what's going to happen with Don, that things are going to look rough for a while, but things are going to get better for him, and he's going to pull this out in the end?
That would be great. I'd love to see that. I don't know. I don't know if Matt Weiner wants to give us a happy ending for everybody at the end or not. But I mean, it does kind of. I mean, it definitely points in that direction with the Mets stuff, and with Freddie's trying to get him sober, and is successful at least within this episode of getting him to straighten up. So maybe I expected to see him get drunker before he gets cleaner, but it's only April, so and we only have 3 more episodes, so he may get uglier and then have a few more stumbles and then ascend to the ultimate heights. That would be nice.
Yeah. Well, you look at how the story kind of closes up a little bit. He gets, of course, very upset about what happens when he goes to confront Bert. He starts drinking in the office, which is, of course, on his restriction. He's not supposed to be doing that at all. That was great that he put in that old Coca-Cola can. I don't really think I've ever seen that. I've seen some older Coca-Cola cans. I'm not familiar with that one. That must have been one that was floating around during that time period. And, of course, he hides the booze in that. So he breaks this big, and I don't know, do you think at that point Don was so just mad, he didn't even care if he gets caught and fired?
Yeah, exactly.
He's at this point like, I don't care. You guys don't care about me. You don't want me working. You just want me to write copy or whatever. Fine, I'll just get drunk. You guys have a reason to get rid of me, and I can move on. Is that what you were thinking too?
I was, but I was also just thinking that those are his coping mechanisms. He's only got so much emotional depth to help him through his hard times. So once he tries ignoring and anger and whatever else, that's all he has. He just needs to shut down. So he needs to figure out something else to get through that. But I think that maybe Freddie is going to convince him to join AA or some sort of program to help him deal with that without stealing booze from Roger. Of course, Roger's no help because 5 minutes into the episode, Roger's like, "Is it too early to start celebrating?" And he's like, "I'm really not supposed to be doing that." So and Roger's like, "Oh yeah, right. But he doesn't have a lot. Everybody's drinking around him. Peggy, as soon as he walks in the office, offered, although she doesn't know, but she offers him a drink. I mean, he is surrounded by alcohol, so that is challenging.
That's a tough environment for someone who is struggling to control his alcohol. That's a tough environment, and having a buddy like Roger is not a good influence.
Yeah.
But I mean, this was a very reckless thing for him to do. It could have really cost him. And then let's talk about his saving grace, Freddie.
Freddie.
Great. I have to admit, at first when he made the phone call, I have to admit, for some reason I was struggling for a second, thinking, who's he calling? And then after a while during the conversation, I'm like going, "You're here, you're there," and I'm like going, "Oh, it's Freddie." And then sure enough, it wound up being Freddie. I thought that was great that Freddie came in there. I think Freddie looks at Don, and even he has a lot. Well, we've talked about this before. He has a lot of admiration for Don. He looks up to him a lot. But I think he also realized he sees himself in him. He sees a guy who really needs to get this drinking under control, because otherwise it's going to destroy him. He's like you said, are you going to kill yourself? They had this great conversation they had towards the end. How did you feel about Freddie coming in and saving the day for Don?
I thought that was great. I mean, I think at some level it's altruistic on Freddie's part, but I think Don's also getting Freddie a lot of work with his ding dong Don Draper calling line. I thought that was funny. That Don's feeding him work or feeding him creative for him to go pitch to other people, and they must have some deal how they cut up the money. So I mean, Freddie's getting something out of it. It behooves him to keep Don reasonably sober, and but I think he's also he's in Alcoholics Anonymous, and I think he is trying to support him and encourage him to straighten up. And he did kind of lose his patience with him. It's like, what the hell are you doing? They let you back in. They've never let Freddie back in to any of the incarnations of Sterling Cooper. So, he had his big whoops, and he's never been able to get back in. I don't think, well, maybe, anyway, he hasn't been able to get back in there. So he's like, they let you back in and you're blowing it. What, you're pissing me off. So, and I think Don heard that. He was like, okay, I really, I need to do the work, which is, I think, Freddie's final line. He's like, do the work, suck it up, eat your pride, go in there and make up taglines for Peggy, that little ballerina needs them. So.
Yep, he was the right man for the right job. He was there
Absolutely.
to tell him exactly what he needed to hear, and I thought that was great. I loved the way that ended for that part of the story, and I think also too when when you bring in the conversation that Peggy has with Joan, where Joan kind of puts things in perspective for her and kind of helps open her eyes a little bit to the situation and stuff. I think what we're going to see hopefully here in the next episode is the two of them doing their best to get along, get work done, and hopefully maybe hit a home run with the Burger Chef. We may not even see the pitch with the Burger Chef. We don't know what's going to happen with that. They may jump ahead and we just will get it as a side mention somewhere. But I think at least as far as the working things, I think we're going to see Don Draper for sure doing his best to try to, like Freddie said, get back to work, and hopefully maybe we're going to see some advertising gold from Don Draper throughout the rest of the season.
Yeah, it would be great to see. It would be great to see Peggy and Don really hit a stride together like they have in the past and come up with a great campaign, and then have Lou, give him a hard time about it, and then everybody get mad at Lou because he's messing up the good creative. So that's my hope, and then Don can throw Lou out the window with his typewriter.
Totally agree. So we'll see what happens. Let's talk about the other big storyline, Roger and Mona. Apparently, Margaret's she's gone off the deep end.
Yeah, I think
she's the best way to describe that.
Yeah, she's tired of, I think, what does she say? She says, I'm tired of adhering to society's role for me or something. I don't pray to that anymore. I forget the exact line.
Yeah, something like that, right?
And it is. And her parents basically, she had two very weak parents. Her father was mostly not there, and her mother didn't really, according to Margaret, was just in the bathroom with the fifth of gin. So, she didn't have anybody to really help her. Her mom, by her own admission, says all she wanted her to do was find a good husband. And she's lost. She doesn't really know how to be a good mother or an effectual mother, and she doesn't really feel like it matters because she never had her parents around to take care of her. So she's out, and that's what all the young people her age are doing around then too. So you kind of feel for her.
Yeah, I mean, sure. I mean, I definitely understand it. She didn't have the best of childhood and didn't have the best example for parents. So that all that made a lot of sense, and I think that to me though, I think the sad part about it is that, yes, all those things are true, but you have a child, and despite the fact that you had these bad examples, maybe that should be your motivation to turn it around and show your parents, hey, listen, this is how it's supposed to be done, and be this great mother. But unfortunately, she's decided that she doesn't want to do that. So it was really a sad story. The whole thing was just a sad story to really see.
Is there any character, or are there any characters on Mad Men who have risen above the bad behavior of their parents?
No, there is not. I've said this before. We should call this Mad Men. What happens when you're a bad parent?
Exactly.
So many of these characters are suffering from the fact that they were raised poorly. That's why I think bad things are going to happen to the Draper kids.
But I think it's good that, Margaret kind of calls both of her parents on it. They both try to say,
right,
but you're the mother, you have to be the mother. And she's like, what are you talking about? Like, neither of you two were present. And she says it to Mona, and she barely gets a sentence out, and Mona's turned on her heels and gone, which tells you everything you need to know about this woman's parenting. That's a Tuesday at my house. So, you have to, dig in and sit there. And Roger does a little bit better of a job, but he doesn't have a huge amount of patience for talking her down either, or whining and dining the client, as Mona calls it. So, he does a good job. I think he's, kind of making a bridge there, but then he kind of just loses his patience with it, too, and tries to drag her off by, lifting her out. And then she calls him on his shortcomings, and neither of them have any response. Neither of them can, say, that's not true, or even say, I was having a hard time. They both just clam up and walk away. It's like they're not even willing to discuss it. So I think if either of them come to her and have a frank conversation with her, she might open up to them. But in the meantime, she's like, I'm going to live with Cletus and whoever these people are at Don Draper's childhood home.
Yeah, exactly. I just, you look at the one of the things I really enjoyed about the storyline, obviously you had the stuff that's going on with Margaret was very interesting, and lots of great television to talk about, because that commune was, those people were very interesting to say the least. But that actually was a very real thing, by the way. We'll talk a little bit about that during our pop culture and historical stuff here. But I thought that all the stuff between Mona and Roger was fantastic. I know that we talked about in our predictions podcast, hoping that we at least see the two of them together interacting, and we got a lot of that in this episode. I know a lot of them kind of was sitting around talking about their faults and stuff, but you had mentioned even the fact that Roger, of course, was flirting a little bit with her. There was just a lot of great stuff going on between the two of them leading up to going and finding where their daughter was. I liked the fact too, the first battle they had was this discussion about with her husband Brooks. She does no faith in him, and and Roger, of course, is doing the manly thing to say, let the man take care of it. And then, of course, as soon as that doesn't work, she's the first one to say, look what you did, genius, or something.
That was a great
That was
message.
awesome.
When they have
And then
the
he has-
secretary come in and read it.
And then, of course, Caroline was getting a little bit too much pleasure out of telling Roger what an idiot he was. he
You gotta know
grabs
she
that
lives
paper
for
from her and
that.
says, "Remember, you listen only to me. Work for me, lady."
Oh God.
Oh, which conversation did you enjoy the ones in the office or the ones in the car leading up to
I think
finding
the
Margaret?
one in the car had a lot of information about how she was like, well, I wish she would have waited to get married like I did, and then
Yeah.
Roger was like, well, you only waited because I wasn't available, assuming that he was still with either in the war or with the girlfriend with the dog food company.
Oh, right, yes.
Um, So, I mean, there was some interesting stuff in there, and then she was asking how much money he had, and he was like, why don't you look in my pocket and find out?
Yeah.
Funny. And I was like, yay, I was right. He's going to try to get her back, or at least, try to have it off with her. So, I mean, there was a lot of good stuff in there, and just sort of where their relationship stands now. I thought it was interesting that at the beginning of that part in the car, Mona says, I'm worried, but you're angry. And I don't know why she says he's angry. I don't know if she wants him to be angry, because he doesn't seem angry.
Come across like angry.
Not at all.
But what we know about Roger, I think for him, he'd be annoyed by the fact that he's got to go out there
Yeah.
and track her down and do all this. I think that's just her way of saying, I'm a mother and I actually care about what happens to this girl, and almost like she kind of implying that maybe he really doesn't.
Yeah.
But I mean, that's kind of how, I mean, I think it kind of stems when you go to the conversation towards the very end when Margaret basically tells Roger, well, what kind of father were you? Did you have any conscience at all about not showing up to work and being with some woman in a hotel room and asking your secretary to simply go get a birthday gift? And apparently she knows about all that stuff, and she is still hurt from this. And if you think about the first time we saw her in the season during the premiere, we have this weird conversation, right, when they have lunch together, and she says, I forgive you. Well, apparently she hasn't forgiven him at all. And I think it's just because of the fact that she knows what kind of father he was and is having a really hard time with it. And boy, Roger's response to that was tough. You could see it cut him deep. I mean, he deserved it. He deserved to hear that because that was the truth. But wow.
I think she wants to forgive them, but she needs them to admit that they need to be forgiven. I mean, like, even in that scene where she was like, I forgive you, he's like, I forgive you too. And she was like, we can't even deal with what the issue is because you won't even admit there's an issue. So, I don't know. Margaret's going to go round and round with that. I don't know if she's ever going to get those people to deal with any of their stuff. They just want to pretend like everything's fine and you grew up and you're fine and we belong to a certain social class and you cannot live on a commune. You need to go home and wear pearls and a Jackie O hat or whatever. You have to be part of this illusion that we're showing everybody. And she doesn't want any of it. She's sick of it. And I think that was a big part of what the 60s was about, was getting rid of all of that and not having, everything be a secret that, somebody drinks or cheats or anything. It was just like, now everybody's going to face up to their stuff. Everybody's going to be in analysis or est or whatever. And this is the tide that turns there.
Yeah, I totally agree. Maybe if he could have just been honest with her right there and said, I was a terrible father, and just been open with her at that point, I don't know if necessarily she still would have left with them or not, but at least it may have helped a lot more than him just walking off in disgust, like, I don't want to talk to you anymore. Because, that was Mona's response was when she realized as soon as she started throwing stuff in her face, she was like, I'm gone. See ya. You're lost. And Roger, of course, he sticks around to try to, like you said earlier, try to wine and dine the client. And then he gets to the point, which I guess it was the point, when he realized, no, she's just out here sleeping around. And I think when she when she went off with that guy. I think that was the moment where for him that he just like, no, she's just gotta wake up to reality here and face responsibilities, and he was done playing around with this whole thing. But
it's kind of hypocritical, though, because, I mean, isn't that what Roger's doing in his apartment in New York? He's got all these hippies in his house, and they're all hanging out and doing drugs and having orgies. And
I think that's exactly what they're trying to tell us. He is totally being hypocritical about the whole thing, because honestly, this girl, he has to see himself in her a lot, right? I know that's kind of what Mona was implying, that, this girl's a lot like you. She's selfish, and she only thinks of herself. And that is kind of exactly what is kind of going on. She's using all these excuses from all these things that happened in her life with her parents and how she was raised, and she's using this excuse to get away from her responsibilities of being a mother and a wife. And that's kind of what Roger is. Roger, he used his work as an excuse. I was too busy working, and I'm whining and dining, and and he only thinks of himself. So Roger.
Meanwhile, sorry, go ahead.
No, I was just gonna say Roger only has himself to blame.
It's true. But I think it's funny, like, meanwhile, where they're talking about how she's being selfish, they leave Brooks in jail for the entire weekend because he'd just be in the way. No, we'll pick him up on our way back. That'll be fine. He's an idiot. He was supposed to be at the rednecks at the bar 3 hours away. It's just like, wow, you people are harsh. Like, just let this guy sit in jail for a whole nother day. Who knows what kind of treatment he's getting. Wow.
Yeah, talk about some rough in-laws. They're willing to leave you in jail for a long time because they just think you're an idiot.
It's pretty brutal.
Oh, it was great. That was pretty funny, the way they handled that whole thing. So are we no longer going to call Margaret anymore? I guess she's it's Marigold, right?
Marigold.
Yeah, I guess that's what we're going to call her from now on. So to close the conversation, what do you think? Is she going to be out there tromping around in Kingston, New York for forever? Is she coming back?
I don't think it'll be forever. I mean, it may be as long if the show only stays in 1969, she may be out there for the whole time, or she may get Ellery out there with her, and maybe Brooks too. I don't know. Maybe they'll. I'm not sure what's going on with Brooks's career. I think Roger was subsidizing that to some degree, and he stopped. So he may or may not be working very much. I don't know what he's doing. So he may go join her on the commune. Who knows?
Yeah, maybe that's right. It will be one big happy family. Bring the son, who I can never pronounce his name correctly. It's
Ellery.
Yeah, that's a very different name, isn't it?
I feel like I've heard it before.
I
live in California. I've heard them all.
It's a West Coast name. Okay, I'm sorry.
I don't know if it's a West Coast name or not, but it sounds like, one of the random names we get out here.
Well, maybe, this season is a lot. We're talking about change stuff. Maybe Roger will have a change of heart, and he'll go out there and say, listen, I know I was a terrible father, a terrible example for you in life, but you really need to reconsider and try to be an awesome mother and not do what me and your mother did, and show us, how it's supposed to be done. I don't know, maybe that can happen for him. You never know.
That would be a huge, huge, huge step for Roger to own his behavior. I would love to see that. I mean, that would be great. And they are all supposed to get their emotional houses in order over this 7-episode arc, so they've only got 3 more. So it's entirely possible that, at least Roger will come back and own up to his poor parenting, and maybe that'll help return her.
Which sure would be great if that happens. I would love to see that. I'm not quite sure if that will, but I do agree with you from your point earlier that I think that would be a big step to helping convince her that, wrong of her ways, and maybe convince her to come back and take care of her kids. So we'll see. Did you have any other thing that you wanted to add to that storyline, or any of the storylines, before we move on to some of the pop culture stuff?
Oh, the only other thing is that there was a reference to Shangri-La again, which we had in episode 2. They showed the title cards from the film Lost Horizon, which is a story about Shangri-La, and then Roger says to Margaret, it's time to leave Shangri-La, and tries to drag her out of there, and she's like, no. So I just thought that was interesting as another reference to it.
Yeah, there was so many great references, and I know Roger was involved in a lot of them in this episode. He's always good for us to have great lines, by the way.
He does.
Without Roger Sterling, we would have probably maybe a little bit more of a boring show. Or at least it wouldn't be nearly as funny.
Exactly. He's definitely the comedy relief much of the time.
Absolutely. That's why he's always been one of my favorite characters, because I love to have a little humor even in a deep drama, because it kind of breaks that ice, and it, to me, makes a show even that much more special when you can still have a little bit of laughter even during moments of serious conversation. So
yeah.
Now you helped me a lot with some of this pop culture stuff. I guess the first thing we can mention is the book, one of the books that this was the one that Don was reading, right?
Oh, Portnoy's Complaint, yeah.
Right.
That was a really famous book. I remember that. I remember hearing about that book a lot when I was growing up. It wasn't something a child would be allowed to read. It came out in '69 by Philip Roth.
Yeah.
And it's regularly on, included in lists of like the top 100 American novels. It's a pretty graphic novel about told in a monologue style to a therapist about this guy's sexual exploits and his angst and it goes on. I mean, it kind of seems like it's the ultimate Don Draper read, because it's he has these like ever increasing sexual encounters that he feels are demeaning, and he never is happy, and he keeps kind of escalating the situation, and it sounds like somebody
book for
we
Don
know.
Draper.
Yes. I was like, I wonder if he's reading that and going, holy crap, who's been following me around?
Yeah, I know there's some sites out there, more than one, I think, if I remember right, but I know there's a couple of them for sure that only talk about all the books that are in Mad Men, and so I'm sure if we went to the list and looked at the ones that Don's been reading, we'd probably be going, whew, this is really eye-opening for Don Draper, and this, I guess we should be surprised he's reading this book.
Well, it was huge. It was a hugely popular book at the time. It made Philip Roth a gigantic celebrity. They just did American Masters on him, I think, 3-4 months ago on PBS. If people are interested, I'm sure you can find that on PBS. They usually have those things streaming. I believe it's an American Masters, Philip Roth. Just Google it, and it'll tell you all about him. And very, very famous writer.
Fantastic, yeah. So I know I'm not familiar with the book, but that's good to know for sure. So, the closing song, the Hollies on a Carousel. What you think about that choice? That was perfect.
I thought that was so perfect. He's like back and he's writing and he's just doing what he can to endear himself back into the company, and they bring back the carousel, which is one, just the going around and round and trying to catch yourself. I think was the line is something about, will I ever catch you, or something like that. So it was good on that level, and it was also good on the carousel level. It's one of his greatest pitches ever, and it was just perfect. I think I let out an audible "aww" when they showed it.
Yeah, that was great. It really was. Yeah. We had a reference to the very short-run TV show Churn On with Tim Conway.
That was funny. I didn't even see that when I first watched it, because I think it's when he's laying on the couch reading the newspaper or something. I was trying to figure out what was in the newspaper, and then when I was watching it again later, I was like, oh, what are they talking about? Tim Conway's show that I guess was so dirty. Networks turned it off in the middle of the pilot episode. They were like, and we're not showing people that. It was supposed to be like a laughing style variety show. Vulgar. It was a little bit vulgar. Tim Conway went a little too blue and got the axe.
Yeah, I'm sure it probably would go just fine in today's television, but in 1969, that was a little bit too much from what I understand.
Yeah, I wonder if it exists anywhere. I tried to Google it kind of quickly to see if I could find it, but I didn't. There's a little snippet about it on IMDb, and it is on Tim Conway's IMDb page, but
yeah,
it would be interesting to ask him about that.
Yeah, we'll definitely have to do that. The paper he was reading was a New York Times paper, which was from '69. And then one of the things I brought to you attention is the Life magazine from 1969. Did you get to see that I sent you?
I did. I didn't get to read the article. I didn't have time, but I did see the cover.
I didn't read the whole thing, but it does talk about the youth communities that was going on in New York at that time, and they even had a picture of a group of them living like on a farm, very similar to what we saw in the show. So that was perfect, wasn't it?
Yeah, it was good. Although I saw somebody on the message boards on AMZ saying, that they thought that they'd gotten that wrong and that there had been communes in upstate New York or wherever they're supposed to be for, hundreds of years, and they weren't all hippy-dippy, whatever. It was an alternate lifestyle. I think maybe this person was raised on one. I don't know, but they had a very different
they knew too much about
experience of it. I'm not damning that person in any way, but just that they felt like it was a misrepresentation of it. I didn't think it was that bad.
No, I didn't think it was bad at all. I think they just did fine with it. So it's who knows. I don't really obviously know anything too much about it. So, but I think they did.
Neither do I.
A Burger Chef, of course, was a real chain of fast food burger joint that was around from 1954, and it's phased out from what I understand in '96 or so. And I think there was, according to what I found, he was one at one point on Staten Island. So that was a real burger place. A couple of their slogans, by the way, I thought was kind of funny. "We'll always treat you right" was one of their slogans, and the other one was "There's more to like at Burger Chef."
I don't think we had those on the West Coast. I don't think I've ever seen a Burger Chef.
Yeah, you know what? I think they had some in the Midwest, but I'm not quite sure because I don't remember eating at one.
Because I think Pete says that they have like 1,000 storefronts all over the country. So I don't know. Anyway.
I don't know either. I don't really remember Burger Chef. Does our producer Rachel, do you remember Burger Chef? No, she doesn't remember Burger Chef. So
write in if you remember Burger Chef, please.
Yes, write us in if you remember Burger Chef. We had the great jingle, Meet the Mets. Don Draper, of course, was singing that. That was a little jingle that they had during that time period for the Mets. Because they were an expansion team, so that was where they kind of came up with. That was kind of cool. And then from what we briefly saw today on Reddit, it looks like, and I don't know this for sure, but a lot of people are saying that the home, the farmhouse that we saw in Kingston, that is basically a lot of them are saying they think that is the same one they used for Don Draper when he was a child living on the farm. They think that's the same home. And I saw some of the side-by-side pictures. They could be right about this. That does look like it could be the same one. And, for production reasons and things like that, that could be a really cost-saving, easy thing to do if, maybe they get a break by shooting at the same location. I don't know. Or maybe it's easier to just, when you go out and, look for locations, sometimes it's easier just to use the same one if you think you get by with it. So it's very possible, but a lot of people are saying they think that's the same home. So look at the side-by-side pictures. I'll have the links and stuff for this episode, which is 73, and you can click on there and look at them and see what you think for yourself.
I thought it was the same one, just without looking at the side-by-side pictures when I saw it last night. I was like, isn't that Don Draper's childhood home where the horse kills his dad? It looks just like that from the exterior. It does. But it doesn't, it's a white clapboard house. What do I know?
Yeah, who knows? So.
I don't know.
Well, I was looking through my notes. The only thing I noticed, I forgot to mention this fact, is that I love the fact that Meredith, of course, is now Don Draper's secretary. That's awesome.
The ultimate insult.
Yeah, she was cracking me up through the entire episode. I love that line where he comes and says, "How was your weekend?" She goes, "Wouldn't you like to know?"
That was sad, though, when she asked how his weekend was, and he said lonely. And she doesn't even react to that. And he's like, "How was yours?" And then she says, "Wouldn't you like to know?" So it's sad that he's just copping to the fact that he's having these lonely weekends alone in his skyrise apartment.
Right.
And then Meredith's commenting on his food. "Don't eat that. You're so nice and trim." When she comes in, he's eating a candy bar or something.
She wants to make sure he stays handsome and thin and good looking.
You're my pretty boy. Don't mess yourself up.
Yeah, I think we're going to have plenty of great interactions between the two of them, hopefully, throughout the rest of the season. So
hopefully all of a platonic nature, because we're saving Meredith for Roger, if it doesn't work out with Mona.
Exactly. Well, normally this is the time we take some questions. I just checked Twitter. I didn't see any questions. I don't see any questions on our screen. So, which, is fine because, unfortunately, we've kind of sprung this at the last minute to change the time up. So I do apologize for those of you who are watching the archives going, I was going to be there for that night. But we will be back for our normal time next week. We'll be back here on Monday night, 8 p.m. Eastern. As far as aware of, there's no changes for that. If you make sure you follow us on Twitter, which you can follow us on Twitter at MadmenCast, and also make sure you either do that, or if you're a Facebook person, you can make sure you check us out on Facebook, which is facebook.com/MadmenCast, because usually a lot of times I'll try to like announce something like that kind of change on there, so that's some way you do that. So do apologize for that, and I am sorry that it, like I said, a few hours from being in the hospital, so I'm not quite myself today. But at least you were the rock star. You did just great tonight, so you kind of helped fill in the gaps there for me. So
anytime. You seem fine.
Yeah, I think it turned out okay. So we did it. We made it through it. So all right. Well, listen, that's going to be it for me. Just remember, everyone, to make sure that you, if you ever need any time you want to send us some feedback, definitely we'd love to hear feedback from you guys. Like I said earlier, make sure you follow us on Twitter. Make sure you follow Elise at EliseCD on Twitter. That would be great. Check out her blog. Elise, where can people find your blog?
ElisesRamblings.com.
Very good. And we'll be hearing, of course, the review of the $1 Million Arm next week from you. So that will be something exciting to check out. And we appreciate each and every one of you listening. Make sure you subscribe to the show. You can go to madmanpodcast.com/YouTube to subscribe to the YouTube channel, and you can go to madmanpodcast.com/iTunes, subscribe to iTunes channel, or go on there to madmanpodcast.com. I got all the links for the many ways you can subscribe to the show, and we really appreciate that, and making sure that you tell everybody about the show and pass along the word. We really appreciate everyone who does that. And Elise, I guess I'm going to let you go. You have a great evening.
You too.
All right, everyone, take care. Remember to stay mad.